Well, hard to believe, but in less than a week, another of those sad anniversaries that marks one of the darkest days in San Francisco history. November 27th will be 30 years since the killings of San Francisco Mayor George Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk at City Hall. Tonight, ABC 7's Wayne Freedman looks back at an event that has changed the city.
There's a place in San Francisco's Castro district where people observe the killings of George Moscone and Harvey Milk several times a day.
Right about here, there was a division.
Nick Romero has given this quick tour so often that it's become second nature. His gift shop is in the same space as the camera store that Supervisor Harvey Milk owned in the 1970s, the place where San Francisco's gay and lesbian liberation began.
Harvey was all about really getting people to understand that gay and lesbians were just like everybody else.
It's come to the point that we talk about Harvey Milk quite a lot on this anniversary every year.
Emergency, where are you? I'm in the mayor's office, and I get an ambulance, code 3, room 200.
But Milk wasn't the only person who died that day. For Chris Moscone, it's about a father who never came home from work.
It is a family tragedy. There's no way of getting around that.
And a guy named Frank Falzon thinks about it a lot, too. He's the homicide detective for whom 30 years later the case remains painful and personal.
Even to this day, I feel like I could cry for the victims. And when I say victims, I'm including the suspect.
People of this city are being viciously attacked, beaten, robbed, raped every day.
Dan White was a child of San Francisco's conservative Irish Catholic core. He quit his job in the fire department as a requirement of joining the Board of Supervisors. White and his wife owned a fast food business on Pier 39, but when they couldn't make ends meet, he felt obliged to resign his board seat.
I have my priorities, and when I see my family start to suffer.
But a few days later, Dan White changed his mind. He decided he wanted his seat on the board back, and somehow he got the impression that Mayor George Moscone, a liberal, would reinstate him. Well, that's not what he heard when he went to the mayor's office. Politics are politics.
And George Moscone tells him, Dan, I'm not giving you back your job. I'm giving it to somebody else.
Dan White put 5 bullets into George Moscone, including 2 to the head. He reloaded. He walked down the hall to Supervisor Milk's office.
He felt San Francisco was turning into a cesspool, and those were his words. And he directed a lot of that anger once he was betrayed towards Harvey Milk and George Moscone.
Both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk have been shot and killed.
Just a few days after hundreds of San Franciscans died in the Jonestown massacre, this city became chaos once again. Harvey Milk became both a martyr and a saint almost overnight.
I think what happened is that nationally, the story of Harvey Milk became important for a movement.
And directly behind Jennifer, I believe that looks like Christopher.
As for the Moscone family, they followed a less political, more understated road.
My father was a great man. He worked hard. He gave his life for what he did, for the people.
The Lord is my shepherd. There is nothing I shall want.
I mean, I'm selfish. I think, gee, I don't have a dad. I don't have a grandfather for my children. I don't have someone that I can talk to and ask questions, simple questions.
When Dan White went to trial, a jury sentenced him not to first-degree murder, but manslaughter. San Francisco's gay community took their anger to the streets. By 1984, Dan White had become a free man again. Out of curiosity, one day, Frank Falzon sought him out. They had been friends in the days before the murders.
He said, you know, Frank, I really lost it that day, didn't I? And I said, Dan, you really did. He says, well, he said, I wanted to get Carol Ruth Silver, and I wanted to get Willie Brown, too.
2 years after his parole, Dan White committed suicide.
There's a hose leading from the exhaust pipe into the car.
The first detective to arrive that day, Frank Falzon.
Looking back today, I personally wish I was not on call, that I never had anything to do with this case, because I'll live with these feelings for the rest of my life.
And so, the ongoing aftermath of a tragic day that has changed many lives.
Harvey Milk made it possible for me to be an out gay business owner. He made it possible for me to have a partner and a husband.
It's worth noting that in 1978, Nick Romero was 5 years old, and Chris Moscone, 16. For all the lessons we've learned from that day, he feels obliged to note the ones we haven't.
Violence isn't over. Murder isn't over. Hatred, things like that. I mean, it's just, we don't learn.
No. On this anniversary, we just remember. From San Francisco, Wayne Freedman, ABC 7 News.